Alright, episode, I'm just going to start doing this. And if you get reviewed, it's your own fault. Hey guys, so this is a new idea. I had make a sort of series out of doing these kind of videos, just talking to camera. Talking about Simpsons episodes, because there are a lot of classics out there that I have a lot to say about, because the first, I would say, 7 seasons, I've seen pretty much every one of the episodes from those first 7 seasons, multiple times, and I know a lot of them really well. So we'll probably make a series out of this, just talking about them individually. So I'm going to start with one of my absolute favourites, Lisa on Ice. It's episode from season 6. And it's about sibling love, and obviously in this case the love between Bart and Lisa, which wasn't quite sort of focused on nearly as much in the early episodes. Definitely in the later seasons, they definitely tried to make Bart and Lisa very much a pair, like a sort of double act, a sort of partners in crime sort of thing. But there's less of a prominent sort of bond between the two of them, I think, in the earlier seasons. And this is sort of one episode that was kind of welcomed, I think, to sort of reinforce the fact that they do genuinely love each other. They're not just two characters that just happen to be brother and sister. They actually do have a real sort of chemistry and a love between the two of them. It's mainly sort of seen as a great episode because of the ending, but I think really that ending only works because of everything that you've seen in the prior events of the episode. I've actually seen some criticism online that there's too much suffering for both Bart and Lisa in this episode. It's kind of interesting. Obviously, I've rewatched it in preparation for this. The first sort of third of the episode is kind of a lot of suffering from Lisa, and Bart kind of being glorified just in comparison. So you can definitely sort of understand Lisa's kind of jealousy almost, or frustration that, she's being sort of hacked out and sort of vilified in a way just for not being as good as Bart. And then the second third of the episode is kind of the reverse of that. Lisa starts to get the upper hand on Bart, and he gets a kind of insult to injury kind of treatment of suddenly you're not as good as Lisa, that's sort of awful. So it's kind of sort of emphasising the fact that sibling rivalry doesn't just come about because of the sibling sort of internal thoughts about, I need to be better than them. It's kind of reinforced by the way that the parents sort of praise the child and, look down upon, the other child that isn't quite as good or hasn't done as well. And obviously, sport is the ideal sort of way to do that. It's weird, though. It's very much a sort of Bart and Lisa episode. I wouldn't call it specifically a Bart or a Lisa episode. I'd call it a Bart and Lisa episode. It's very much about their relationship. It's not so much about the two characters as individuals. In fact, you could argue that this is not a very typical sort of Lisa episode. She's not portrayed in a sort of typical sort of emotional, a very sort of clever kind of way like she normally is. Bart's very much sort of like Bart normally is. But weirdly, Homer is probably the guy that really shines out in this episode. As far as the main 4 family members are concerned, he's probably the character that really stands out. He gets probably most of the really good laughs, like the line that I referenced in the opening to this video, where he tells the pie that he's just going to start opening and shutting his mouth, and if the pie gets eaten, it's its own fault. And he actually makes quite a big dent in the cooker when he approaches it and just slams into it head on. I don't really understand why he's got his eyes shut when he's doing that. It's like you never, when you were making this agreement with the pie, you never said anything about how you had to shut your eyes. But obviously, the gag does not work unless you have him shut his eyes. Welcoming Lisa into the front seat of the car, Lisa saying, "Oh no, I don't want to do that. If you're rewarding me for, violence in a competitive sport, but if it's a gesture of parental love, I'll happily sit up front with you." And I was just like, oh, okay, well, sucker, because the reason why you're here is because of competitive sport. He's obviously just sort of he's not even really bothered why he's asking Lisa to come up front. He just sort of thinks that this will sort of annoy her in some kind of way. That's almost kind of like a thing that you do with your brother or sister, actually, in a way. But actually, Homer is kind of the most childish person in this whole relationship. There's criticism online about the fact that Bart and Lisa suffer quite a lot through this episode. And, to me, the ending doesn't work unless you see them suffering. That's kind of the point. The ending is not nearly as satisfying unless you see that suffering that they've gone through. A couple of moments that I notice a lot of people seem to specify as just too much, it's too sort of mean-spirited or something, is when Bart runs outside of the house in just his pyjamas, and they all laugh at him, which to me is kind of something Bart's brought on himself, because even if it had been snowing, you still run outside in your pyjamas. That's kind of on him, ripping the head off his own childhood toy. Again, he's literally done that himself. He's only got himself to blame. And then I think the other one is he's beaten up by the bullies, and then the rest of the school laugh at him for Lisa being the one to save him. That is one, actually, I can probably agree with. I don't really understand what's so funny about that. Why is being helped out by your sister amusing or something? But again, I guess at that point, that is obviously the sort of pinnacle of pushing Bart over the top, because the very next scene is him confronting Lisa about this whole thing. So I guess, perhaps it was supposed to be exaggerated in terms of how unfair it is, and how it's very understandable that this would be Bart being like, I've had enough of this. I'm not a huge ice hockey fan myself. I enjoy watching it from time to time, but it's not really a sport I can really get into and watch regularly or anything. But I understand the sort of basics of how it works. I don't believe the clock is supposed to be running during a penalty shot, so the ending, in that sense, does not make sense. But if you don't have the clock run out at the end there, the ending doesn't make sense. The ending doesn't really work. Also, you don't really have to be an ice hockey fan to understand this, but if Lisa saves that penalty shot at the end, it's still a tie. That penalty shot was not going to determine the winner. It was just going to determine whether or not Bart's team won or it was a tie. Minor sort of things that bother me about that. It's also kind of interesting that this opening has kind of a style that's more like more recent Simpsons, with something that just has nothing to do with the plot of the episode, that action news bit. And then he actually sort of leads into the fact that Bart doesn't want to do his book report. Which also really has nothing to do with the plot of the episode. So it's kind of sort of interesting, but that in turn then leads into the actual plot of the episode, and the principal calling them to that meeting or assembly where Lisa finds out that she's failing Jim, and at that point the episode's plot really kicks in. It's two things that sort of very vaguely relate into the plot of the episode. It's sort of a sort of detoured way of actually getting to the actual sort of point. And I don't know whether they just found that the actual plot of the episode maybe was it ran short or something, and they needed just something at the beginning of the episode to just fill the time, because you can't stick something onto the end of the episode. That would ruin the ending. I guess it kind of works. It's not like anything of like my favourite gags in the episode, that sort of whole action news bit, because having only been 8 years old when this episode first aired, and also not living in America, I can't really relate to what they're making fun of there in any special kind of way. But there are a lot of really good gags. They mostly come from Homer, though. But obviously the main thing about this episode that really, I think a lot of people love about it, is that ending. And Bart and Lisa just putting their differences aside and remembering that before they became rivals, they were brother and sister, and they always loved each other, and they still do. The moments that they show, the little sort of flashback things that we see, I never really sort of picked up on this when I first watched the episode, but rewatching it just now, I've sort of noticed that actually Bart is remembering moments where Lisa helped him out, and Lisa is remembering moments where Bart helped her out. To me, I always just sort of saw them as just sort of little moments of them sharing, a nice memory together and being happy. But it's quite obvious, when you really watch it. Lisa is helping Bart get cookies, and she is mending a cut on his knee, and Lisa is remembering Bart sharing his ice cream with her. I'm trying to remember now, what was the other one? Oh, making her laugh because of Shadow. So that's a sort of another sort of clever thing that I hadn't noticed before. Would have been very easy, I think, to have made that moment a little bit too sort of sickly, sort of sweet, or something a bit sort of too much sort of sweetness and everything. But they're very sort of brief moments, and it's kind of obvious what's happening. And it's not even so much the fact that it's sort of cute or sweet or anything. It's the fact that they're helping each other out, I think, is the sort of key detail. You completely understand why they don't want to do this after remembering those kind of moments. So it's a very sort of subtle but also very sudden sort of shift in the tone that makes you completely understand why they make this decision that no, they don't want to become rivals like this. They still love each other. So I really like that. I've heard some people argue that it's just a hockey game at the end of the day. That they're not really rivals. They don't really hate each other just because they happen to be opponents in a hockey match. I play football sort of a kind of amateur level quite regularly. I understand the fact that even if I'm up against a friend in some kind of tournament, they're my opponent when I'm playing football against them on the pitch. But as soon as the match is over, we're friends again. So I've heard some criticism of the fact that it's going against that idea. Oh, it's wrong to be opponents in a sporting atmosphere or something. If there's someone that you genuinely like, you should be on the same team, or you should refuse to play or something. It's like, no, I think you're just reading a bit too much into it. They just happened to be facing off in this hockey game when they decided to put their differences aside, and also we're shown that they are definitely rivals outside of the game, because we see them fighting, before the match as well. Oh yes, and one last moment that I liked, Marge just says to them at one point, oh, look at Milhouse's teeth, he got knocked out during the hockey match. Milhouse knocks on the door and says, do you have my teeth? And Marge's like, no. So I'm convinced that they wrote that scene, and then someone in the writer's room is just sort of asking, hold on, why does Marge have Milhouse's teeth? So they just added that joke in there. It's like, oh, okay, let's make fun of that. I thought that was actually one of the best gags. So yeah, actually not really remembering most of the gags from this episode that well, really. I'm remembering more just the sort of overall plot and everything. But yeah, I love it mainly for the ending. You know, some people will argue, I think, that that ending does not work if you don't have everything before that. You know, it's kind of a slow build to a really sort of satisfying ending, you know. Without the ending, it's just a sort of average sort of episode, but that ending really makes everything that you've sat through before that absolutely worth it. So, really like this episode. And if you guys like this format, you like this as an idea going forward, let me know in the comments. And if you have any requests for episodes you'd like me to talk about, leave them down in the comments. Preferably, I'd like it to be an episode from the first 9 seasons, since those are the seasons that I know the best. Okay, see you soon, guys.